The ground disappeared beneath my feet. Not gradually, not with any warning I recognized in time to do something useful about it. One step, it was there, solid enough. The next step, something had changed underneath it, and I was sinking. And the cart behind me was tilting sideways, and the horse I had driven from Norwich to this god-forsaken estuary was screaming in a way I had never heard a horse scream before. And the water was still coming, still galloping across that flat grey expanse of sand and mud, white at the front of it. Nothing slowing it down, nothing between it and us. 40 men and 20 carts, and every coin and jewel and document the King of England owned, standing directly in its path, with nowhere to go and no one to tell us what to do. There was no guide. That is the sentence I've repeated to myself for the rest of my life, in the hours before sleep. There was no guide. We crossed the most dangerous tidal estuary in England with the entire fortune of a kingdom, and not one man among us who knew that ground. We were just told to cross, so we did. My name is Edmund. I drove carts, not a glamorous trade, not the kind of work that gets recorded in chronicles or remembered by historians. I was 30 years old, strong enough to manage difficult horses in difficult conditions, reliable enough that the royal household had used me on 3 previous journeys without incident. I grew up in Norwich. My father was a carpenter. My mother made candles and sold them to the church near her house, and came home smelling of tallow every evening of my childhood. I tell you this because I want you to understand what kind of man I was before that October morning. An ordinary one, a man whose biggest concerns before that day were keeping his axes greased and his horses fed, and arriving at wherever he was supposed to arrive without losing anything entrusted to his care. I had never lost anything entrusted to my care, not once, in 6 years of driving for anyone who would pay me. Then came the wash and King John's treasure, and the North Sea waiting for us on the other side of a decision nobody with actual authority had thought carefully enough about. And in 20 minutes, I lost everything. Everything the king owned. Everything. Let me tell you what England looked like in October of 1216. Not the England of kings and barons and grand political movements. The England I knew. The England a cart driver sees from the road. It was frightened. Every time we passed through on that journey east was quieter than it should have been. Markets half empty, those closed in the middle of the day. Men standing in doorways, watching us pass with expressions I had learned to read over months of moving through a country at war with itself. Not hostile, not welcoming, just watching, waiting to see which way things were going to fall before they committed to anything. The country had been tearing itself apart for years. King John. And I'll be honest about this man because dishonesty about him helps nobody, was the reason. He had taxed his barons until they had nothing left to give, and then demanded more. He had made promises in writing, sealed with his own wax, and broken them before the wax cooled. His own noblemen had finally had enough. They forced him to sign a document called the Magna Carta, a charter that said even a king had limits, that even the most powerful man in England could not simply do whatever he pleased to whoever was beneath him. He signed it, then he spent the next year treating every promise in it as a temporary inconvenience. The barons invited the French prince to take his crown. By October 1216, John was not a king holding a kingdom. He was a king moving frantically between the part of a kingdom he still controlled, trying to hold the remaining pieces together through sheer force of movement, as though stopping in one place too long would allow everything to collapse around him. His treasury moved with him, not because he was careless, because in a civil war, you cannot leave your treasury somewhere and trust it to still be there when you return. He traveled on 20 carts, guarded, inventoried, moved whenever he moved. I was one of the men who moved it. I had been driving for the royal baggage train for 4 months by the time we reached the wash. 4 months of roads in various states of ruin, of river crossings where the bridges were out and they had to find fords that wouldn't swallow a loaded cart, of sleeping beside my horses in fields and barns, and twice in the open with rain coming in sideways off the sea. I knew my horses by then, the way you know anything you depend on for your survival. The big grey one I called Thomas because he had the expression of a disappointed priest. The 2 chestnuts I had privately named after my younger brothers, which I never told anyone because it would have sounded strange. 4 months of difficult roads had made us into something, not friends exactly, because a horse is not a friend, but something that understood each other's limits. I knew when Thomas was at the edge of what he could give. I knew when he needed 10 minutes or he had nothing left. On the morning of the 12th of October, Thomas had already given most of what he had. We all had. The king crossed the wash by the longer route. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because it matters more than almost anything else I am going to tell you. John knew the wash was dangerous. He knew it well enough that he personally took the longer road around the most treacherous sections of the estuary, traveling safely to the far shore by a route that avoided the worst of it entirely. Then he ordered the baggage train to take the shortcut, the direct crossing, straight across the Wellstream Estuary, faster, more direct, the kind of route that makes sense on a map drawn by someone sitting comfortably far away from the actual ground. We were told to cross at the Wellstream and meet the king on the other side. We were not told there would be no guide. We were not told that the men who knew that estuary, the fishermen, the local traders who had spent their lives reading those tides, were not among the 40 men and 20 carts now lining up at the edge of that flat grey expanse. We looked at it. We saw mud and sand and shallow water and the far shore that looked reachable. We started walking. I need to tell you what the wash actually is, because the name tells you nothing useful. It is a vast tidal estuary on the eastern coast of England where several rivers meet the sea. At low tide, enormous areas of it become exposed, flat miles of wet sand and mud that looked from the surface almost like solid ground. Almost. The difference between the ground that will hold the loaded cart and the ground that will swallow one is invisible. Same color, same texture from above. You cannot tell by looking. Men who knew the wash could tell. They knew which channels to avoid, which sections ran firm, how the ground changed character as you moved deeper toward the center. They had learned it the way you learn anything that can kill you, carefully, over years, from people who had learned it before them. We had none of those men. We had 40 people who had been told to cross and were crossing. The first hour was hard, but it seemed manageable. The hedges were firmer. The horses found footing. The carts rolled slowly, but they rolled. I was watching Thomas's ears. He tells me things through his ears before anything else. Flattens them when the ground feels wrong beneath his hooves. His ears were flat from the first mile. I told myself it was the unfamiliar ground. New terrain unsettles horses. It means nothing. It meant something. By the time we reached the middle sections, the wheels were sinking between each rotation, the mud releasing them slowly and reluctantly, like it was tasting each cart before deciding whether to keep it. The horse immediately ahead of me began to struggle, and then the cart it was pulling stopped moving entirely. Axle deep in ground that had seemed solid 3 steps before it swallowed the wheels. We stopped. Men pushed. Horses strained. 20 minutes to free that one cart. None of us knew. We had just spent the only spare time we had. I heard it before I understood it. A sound from the direction of the open sea. Low. Building. I had no knowledge of what that sound meant in that particular place. A man who had spent his life on that estuary would have been moving before the sound finished arriving. He would have been shouting, abandoning everything, running for the nearest solid ground, because he would have known exactly what was behind that sound and how fast it was traveling. I stood and listened for a moment, trying to place it. Then I saw the white line at the edge of the flat, and my body understood before my mind did. And I was already shouting before I had words for what I was shouting about. The water moved the way nothing I had ever seen water move before. Not rising, raising, a horizontal wall of white coming across the flat at a speed that made the distance between it and hers feel like nothing, like it was already here, even while I was still watching it arrive. Men caught horses from harnesses and rode. Men ran on foot. Men looked at the carts they were responsible for and made calculations about what the King of England does to a man who abandons his treasury. And some of those men stayed. I cut Thomas loose, the two chestnuts too. I cut all four of my horses free because they did not deserve what was coming, and I could not save the carts, and I chose the horses, and then I chose myself, and I ran. Thomas ran beside me for perhaps 50 yards before he pulled ahead, his longer legs covering ground faster than mine, and the last I saw of that horse, he was already near the edge of the firm ground and still going. I hope he made it. I have thought about Thomas more than I have thought about the treasure. Each probably says something about me that a more dignified man would keep to himself. The water caught the rarest cat while I was still running. I know this because I heard the sound change behind me, the screaming of horses that had not been freed, the different quality of shouting that happens when men stop trying to solve a problem and start trying to survive it. I did not look back until my feet hit firm ground and my legs gave out beneath me, and I was on my hands and knees on solid earth with the breath coming out of me in something that was not quite crying but was not far from it either. Then I looked back. The carts were gone, not sinking, not tilted and visible at odd angles. Gone. The water was flowing across the entire crossing, flat and grey and undisturbed, and there was nothing on its surface that suggested a baggage train carrying the entirety of a king's fortune had been crossing it 30 minutes before. 20 carts, 200 horses, the crown regalia of England, gold coins accumulated over generations of a kingdom's wealth, royal documents, treaties, evidence of every debt owed to the crown. Gone. The North Sea had come across that estuary, and it had taken all of it, and it looked, from where I was kneeling on the edge of the far shore, completely unbothered about what it had done. I do not know how many men did not make it to the solid ground. I counted survivors that evening when we made camp, and the number I came to did not match the number that had set out that morning. And I have never written down the difference because writing it down makes it permanent in a way that I have never been ready for. Some of the men I had traveled with for 4 months, some of them I knew by name and story, and the particular way they complained about the food on long journeys. The way men who spend months together always know each other, not deeply, not the way you know your wife or your brother, but specifically, the specific shape of a specific person. Gone. Along with everything else the wash took that morning. I was brought before the royal officials 3 days later. I told them what I have told you. No guide. The ground that looked solid until it wasn't. The sound before the water. The horses I freed. The men who stayed. And the moment I reached the far shore and saw nothing behind me but sea. They listened. They wrote things down. Nothing came of it that I have ever heard about. The civil war continued. The king was dying. Dysentery, eating away at him through those final days. A body that had run out of reserves during months of desperate campaigning. He died on the 18th of October, 1216, at Newcastle. just 6 days after the crossing. His 9-year-old son was crowned King Henry III 2 weeks later, using spare regalia cobbled together from what could be found, because the original crown of England was at the bottom of the wash. They have been searching for it ever since. 800 years. Geologists, archaeologists, historians, treasure hunters with equipment that looked like witchcraft to any man who stood on that estuary that October morning. All of them looking, nothing found. The wash has changed shape many times since 1216. Rivers redirect over centuries, channels fill the open again. 800 years of tidal movement has reshaped that coastline so completely that the exact location where those carts went under may not correspond to any point of any modern map. The crown regalia of medieval England is somewhere in that mud, still there, the greatest unsolved treasure mystery in English history, and it has been unsolved for 8 centuries and counting. I went back to Norwich eventually. There was nothing else to do. The royal household had larger problems than a cart driver, with no carts and no horses, and the story about an estuary that nobody wanted to hear repeated. I found work, married a woman named Alice, who made the best bread I have ever tasted, and who asked me once, in the first year of our marriage, what the worst thing I have ever seen was. I told her about the cart going sideways into the mud. I told her about the sound the horses made. She held my hand while I told it and didn't say anything when I was finished, which was exactly the right thing to do. I think about Thomas sometimes, the big grey with a disappointed priest's expression. I hope he found his way to firm ground before the water caught him. I think about the men who stayed with the cart. I think about that morning more than I have ever been able to fully explain to anyone, including Alice, including myself. No guide. That is still the sentence that arrives before sleep. We crossed without a single guide, and the North Sea was waiting for us as though it had always known we were coming and had simply been saving our particular place for a day that suited it. My name is Edmund. I drove cart for 6 years without losing a single thing entrusted to my care. Then came one October morning on one estuary with no guide and 20 carts and a tide that moves faster than horses, and I lost everything, a king's everything, the most expensive mistake in English history, made by 40 ordinary men who were just told to cross. So we did.